We can't keep doing this. It's tearing us apart.
I know, but we don't have a choice. We have to stick together.
The two officers exchanged a look that said more than words ever could. One of them, Officer Ramirez, scratched his beard and tilted his head at Karen, who was still standing with her arms crossed like she was auditioning to be the new sheriff of the neighborhood. "Ma'am," he said gently, "this property is clearly deeded to him. It's not HOA land." But Karen wasn't done. She never was. She jabbed a finger toward my ranch house, the sun-bleached wood reflecting years of storms and summers. "That house is a hazard. Look at the weeds. Look at the broken fence. He abandoned it. That makes it HOA jurisdiction." I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. The ranch wasn't abandoned. It had been sitting exactly as I left it, waiting for me, like an old friend who didn't judge the time you took to return. "Ma'am," Ramirez repeated with a little more steel in his voice, "that's not how property law works." But Karen stepped closer, squinting at me like she was sizing up a criminal. "You expect us to believe you just show up after all these years," she said. "People don't just disappear for a decade and stroll in like they own the place." "I do own the place," I said, lifting the deed again for emphasis. Karen sniffed. "Well, you can show me your ownership by cooperating with the HOA reinstatement process. There's a fee." Several fees, actually. Of course there were. Before I could respond, Officer Ramirez cleared his throat loudly. "Ma'am, I think it's best if you let him settle in. There's no legal violation here." But Karen stepped even closer, too close, and whispered, "This neighborhood has standards. If you want to stay, you'll follow them." The officers, seeing the situation escalate, suggested she return home. She glared at them, then at me, then marched away so sharply her heels dug trenches in my dusty driveway. The patrol car rolled off, leaving me in the fading afternoon light. For the first time in years, I had a moment alone with the ranch. The porch creaked when I stepped onto it, the same familiar sound from childhood summers. I brushed my hand along the railing. Dust rose in lazy swirls, catching the amber sunlight like tiny fireflies. Inside, the air smelled like aged timber and memories. The old photo frames were exactly where Mom had left them. Dad's boots, worn and cracked, still sat by the door. Time had been harsh on the paint and the ceiling beams, but gentle on everything that mattered that I exhaled. I was finally home. That piece lasted exactly 4 minutes. A sharp metallic clang echoed from the barn and I froze. The wind wasn't strong enough to knock anything over. Not that loudly that I stepped off the porch and walked toward the barn, dust crunching under my boots. The sun dipped lower, stretching my shadow across the dry grass. When I reached the barn doors, I noticed one was slightly ajar. I remembered closing it before I left all those years ago. I nudged it open. "Hello," I called out. The barn was dim, afternoon light cutting through the gaps in the walls. The air smelled like hay, rust, and something else, something recently disturbed that a stack of crates had fallen over. Tools lay scattered across the ground like someone had rummaged through them. My stomach tightened. Had someone been living here? Had someone been using my barn? I pulled out my phone to use the flashlight, and that's when I heard it, a soft shuffle. From the back corner, my grip tightened. The beam of my phone cut through the shadows, landing on an old tarp draped over something large. It twitched. "Who's there?" I demanded. Silence that I stepped closer, boots crunching softly on hay and broken wood. Every instinct in my body screamed that something or someone was hiding beneath that tarp. When I reached it, I grabbed the edge with one hand, bracing myself. Before I could pull it back, a voice echoed from behind me. "You shouldn't be here." I spun around so fast, I nearly dropped my phone. In the doorway stood a tall man in a dusty jacket, his face half hidden in shadow. He wasn't one of the officers. He wasn't a neighbor I recognized. And he definitely wasn't part of the HOA. He stared at me with an expression I couldn't read. Half warning, half recognition. I swallowed. "This is my property." "I know," he said, taking a slow step inside, boots silent on the packed earth. "That's why you shouldn't be here." My skin prickled. "Who are you?" He didn't answer. Instead, he glanced toward the tarp behind me, then back at me. Then he said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "They're going to come back. And when they do, you won't want to be anywhere near this place." The barn suddenly felt colder. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. "You shouldn't trust the HOA," he added. "Not here. Not anymore." Before I could ask anything else, he slipped into the fading daylight, disappearing behind the trees as quickly as he had appeared. I stood there in the barn, heart pounding, the tarp still twitching behind me, and 100 questions swirling in my mind, none of them with answers. And somewhere far off in the neighborhood, I heard Karen's voice again. This time, she wasn't yelling. She was laughing, a slow, satisfied, too knowing laugh. The kind that meant whatever was happening here was much bigger than property lines, fees, or broken fences, and I hadn't even begun to uncover it. The moment those records came through the officer's radio, the entire atmosphere shifted. You could feel it, like the air tightened, waiting for something to snap. Officer Ramirez stepped closer to Karen, holding the radio handset like it was evidence. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "the county shows no authorized jurisdiction change for this property, or any of the others your HOA claimed." Karen blinked, once, twice, and for the first time since she marched on my driveway, her confidence cracked. That must be a clerical issue," she stammered. "We filed the expansion properly. Our board approved it." Ramirez exchanged a look with his partner, Officer Liu. "Approving something internally doesn't make it legal," Liu said bluntly. "You need county signatures, state authorization, notifications, public hearings. None of that happened." Karen's face drained of color. "That's impossible." I was told by who?" Ramirez asked. That question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again, clutching her clipboard like it was a life raft. Her eyes flicked back and forth between the officers, then toward the row of houses at the end of the street, almost as if she expected someone to appear or maybe warn her. "There must be some mistake," she whispered. Ramirez shook his head. "Ma'am, illegally annexing land isn't a mistake. That's a violation of state property law, HOA regulations, and county zoning statutes. This is big." Karen's clipboard slipped from her hand and hit the ground with a flat thunk. Then the officers did something unexpected. They stepped away from her and began quietly discussing next steps. Words like audit, fraud, board investigation, and contact county legal drifting over the warm afternoon air. Karen just stood there frozen, breathing like she'd run a marathon. I should have felt satisfied, maybe even vindicated, but instead, I felt watched. The houses nearby looked normal, porches decorated, windows bright, American flags fluttering gently. But something about them felt off. Too still, too quiet, like everyone inside was waiting, listening, bracing for fallout. Finally, Officer Liu approached me. "Sir, I just want to confirm, how long were you gone?" 10 years, I said. "I left the place in good shape. My family has owned this ranch for generations." He nodded. "And in that time, did the HOA ever contact you about any changes, meetings, fees, hearings?" "No, nothing." Liu exhaled sharply. "That's exactly the problem." Before I could ask what he meant, a call came through on Ramirez's radio. The dispatcher's voice was urgent, more urgent than anything in our conversation so far. "Units 7 and 12, be advised. County legal confirms multiple annexations were filed by the Willow Creek HOA without authorization. Repeat, unauthorized expansions. Proceed with caution. Additional units en route." Karen's breath hitched. "Additional units?" she whispered. For what?" Ramirez didn't answer her. Instead, he stepped between us, as if instinctively forming a protective barrier. "Sir," he said to me, "I need you to stay close. This situation may be bigger than a boundary dispute." I thought of the man in the barn, his warning, his strange familiarity, his final words. "You shouldn't trust the HOA." "Not here. Not anymore." As the officers radioed updates, the wind shifted, carrying with it the sound of a distant engine. Then another, and another. Multiple cars approaching fast. Karen finally snapped out her daze. She spun around and hurried down the street toward the HOA office building. A converted ranch-style home with perfect white shutters and a perfectly manicured lawn. But as she got closer, something strange happened. The blinds on the office window snapped shut. The front porch light turned off, and the front door, normally propped open during HOA business hours, slammed shut like someone inside was sealing it against her. Karen froze mid-step. What? No, no. They told me. She turned back toward us, face pale, voice cracking. They promised they filed everything legally. They promised we were protected. Protected from what? Ramirez stepped toward her, hand near his belt. Not threatening, but prepared. Ma'am, he said carefully, I'm going to need you to tell us exactly who on the HOA board handled these annexations and what they told you. Karen shook her head wildly. No, you don't understand. If I tell you, She stopped. Her eyes widened. Not at the officers, not at me, but at something behind us that I turned to the far end of the road. 3 black SUVs were pulling into the neighborhood. Slow, silent. Windows tinted darker than legal. They weren't police cars, and they definitely weren't county vehicles. Every hair on my arm stood up. Whatever this was, it was no longer just about a ranch, or an HOA, or a misunderstanding. Something deeper was unfolding. Something Karen was terrified to say, out loud. And the SUVs were getting closer. 5 minutes later, after a quick call from the county legal office, the cops informed Karen that not only was I fully within my rights to be on my ranch, but her entire HOA had just been dissolved pending investigation. Her face drained of color as the officers instructed her and the board members to cease all HOA activity immediately. Meanwhile, I stood on my porch, watching her storm off with her broken clipboard, knowing that the land my family built was finally free from her unnecessary rules, and that sometimes karma works faster than anyone expects. But as Karen disappeared down the road, something in her posture didn't look defeated. It looked furious, determined, like someone who wasn't walking away from a loss, but walking towards someone who'd promised her things that were never legal to begin with. And when she reached the corner of the street, a dark sedan rolled up beside her. She didn't speak to the driver. She just opened the door, slipped inside, and the car pulled away without a sound. No headlights, no plates, just gone, swallowed by the tree line like it had never been there. I felt the same uneasy chill I'd felt in the barn. The HOA might have been dissolved on paper, but whatever had been operating behind it, that part wasn't gone at all, and they clearly weren't finished with me.